Hello, hackers. Welcome to Saturday Hacker Day. My name is Taggart, and today, as always on Saturdays, we're doing some blue team work. We've got a lot of cool stuff planned for today. Welcome, folks. And as always, we are going to get started with a little bit of a review of the last week in cyber news. So, a few interesting items that I wanted to touch on today. First up, we got to talk about the T-Mobile breach. This news just keeps getting worse and worse. I think the last report about T-Mobile was that we are at 54 million customers' data has been breached. Hey, Angel, good to see you. Ewoks and PCAPs, no muscles. The Flet, thanks so much for hanging out. So T-Mobile has at least admitted kind of slyly to at least 54 million users' information having been captured and is up for sale on. Is it actually for sale on the dark web or is it someplace else? I do think this one is on the dark web. And interestingly, it's not getting sold for that much. I think that somebody was claiming to have 100 million customers' information and selling it for 6 Bitcoin, which is around about $280,000. Which honestly, that doesn't seem like enough for that much data, especially because it appears to be full out, user data, including social security numbers, things like that. So if you are a T-Mobile customer, or if you were at any point a T-Mobile customer, I would recommend checking out any of their disclosures, although they're being super cagey about it. And just as a safety precaution, confirming that any accounts that may have used the same password that you used for T-Mobile, just get those reset. Make sure that you're always using unique passwords for all of your accounts and using a password manager. Normal, good cyber hygiene stuff like that. I know that this audience is going to be on top of that, but I think it needs to be said anyway. And keep an eye on the T-Mobile breach because it's so big that it's entirely possible there may be some sort of regulatory consequences for it. Yeah, Ewoks and PCAPs, I don't know how far back this goes either. I'd be interested to see some of that. And once some of this data starts getting leaked, I'm sure we will have more of that information. Also wanted to shout out a brand new kind of ransomware. Hey, Security Live, thanks so much for the follow. A new kind of ransomware actor that is going after the Microsoft Exchange proxy shell vulnerabilities. So this ransomware gang is called Lockfile. I believe they use the Lockbit ransomware when they finally deploy. And they're going after the Exchange vulnerabilities known as proxy shell, which were discovered or disclosed during the last pwn to own. So these vulnerabilities are known, they should be patched at this point, but a lot of places don't or can't and are still running legacy Exchange servers rather than using Office 365, right, and using Exchange Online. So for those people, this is still an issue, and it seems to be a fairly aggressive campaign. By the way, if you want to see what this looks like and you want to follow a researcher who's doing really cool work on this, I would check out Mr. Reboot or Daniel Card on Twitter. I think his handle is like UK_Daniel_Card or something like that. I'll look that up. But he's doing some really cool work. He sets up labs and sets up basically honey pots on the internet to track what malicious actors are actually doing with these vulnerabilities and then reports that data. Very, very cool stuff. And if you are running Legacy Exchange, stop. There really is not a whole lot of good business rationale for not going to the cloud managed service. Now, you could go conspiracy theory and think, oh, okay, well, all this ransomware that all these vulnerabilities against Exchange are just an attempt from Microsoft to get everybody over into their managed services. Probably not, but even if you do have some reason to have, on-prem Exchange, maybe for retention reasons, for legal requirements, things like that, you can operate it as a relay so that your primary mail server is still managed by Microsoft. You don't have to worry about these legacy Exchange vulnerabilities. Definitely something to look into if your organization is still running legacy Exchange. And then last bit of news, I know we're kind of powering through these, but last bit of news, this is just cool. It's not scary. Well, it's a little scary, but I think it's just cool. So researchers at Ben Gurion University in Israel, and there have been some cool findings out of Israeli researchers. Um, oh, Ewoks and PCAP says something about exchange. So one unfortunate reason is if you're stuck with Skype for business on-prem, which requires exchange for on-premise voicemail. Uh, Yeah, but even then, I think you can still operate it as a relay, so you can have it set there and then pass it up to Exchange Online. So yeah, so researchers at Ben Gurion University in Israel have discovered this unbelievable side channel attack. Now, a side channel attack is exploiting unintentional leaks of information from a separate process. So another cool side channel attack that I loved was that people were able to read CPU operations based on their radio emissions because of the changing EM signature as the CPU is doing its work. So if you had a sensitive enough EM detector, or sorry, a radio antenna, if you had a sensitive enough, oh my god, a sensitive enough antenna within range of the CPU, you could actually read the instructions being executed by the CPU based on its radio emissions. Wild, right? This is a similar sort of thing. So the glowworm side channel attack allows an attacker to detect audio in a video conference or any other sort of sound emitting event on a computer based on the imperceptible flickers of the speaker's LED. So as the speaker is making noise, right, and power is going through it, because it is in the same circuit as the LED that indicates power, there will be, and because it's an analog situation and you're using like levels of power for the different levels of sound, you can actually detect, if with a sensitive enough instrument, the tiny flickers of the power LED based on the different levels of sound. And with that, you can reconstruct, once you have a pattern established, you can reconstruct the conversation even if you can't hear what the speaker is emitting. So if you have line of sight to the LED, you can actually collect the sound anyway. It's a really cool, I don't know how practical it is as a side channel attack, because you could also use a laser microphone to do some of this, but it is a really cool kind of unintentional leak of information. It's one of those things, it's like the corollary of the conservation of energy, which is that we're not totally sure about this yet. There's some really cool quantum physics research going into this, but it seems to be the case that information itself is neither created nor destroyed, that it can only change shape. And that's pretty cool too. All right, moving on from the cyber news. Today we are going to be, oh, sorry, I didn't have the glowworm up. So today we're going to be taking a look at Velociraptor. And Velociraptor is a tool from Velocidex that kind of serves two purposes depending on how you deploy it. You can deploy it kind of as just like a one-shot, and that would be for incident response. What it can do is collect all sorts of event logs from an endpoint and really give you an idea of what was going on a system. So you could use it in an incident response context. However, Velociraptor can also operate as a server with multiple clients. And in that deployment scenario, you can use it for continuous monitoring of state. So it very much fills the same sort of role as, not EDR really, but something like OS query, where you want to have the ability to look at configuration of your systems across a large environment. Velociraptor is open source, so that's pretty exciting. And we've talked about Velociraptor before on this channel when we did open source EDR. And it has agents or clients for, at least Mac and Windows, or sorry, at least Windows and Linux. I believe it has Mac OS as well. So if you are interested in sort of a cross-platform tool for monitoring your environment, it might be worth checking out Velociraptor. So what we're going to do today is we're going to start by taking a Windows endpoint. We're going to infect it with some malware, and then we're going to run Velociraptor on it to see what it finds. That's step one. Then we're going to rewind that, and we're going to set up Velociraptor as a server and see how it works in that scenario and how we can set up Velociraptor to collect information from multiple endpoints in an environment. So let's get started. If you want to play along, this is the Velociraptor repo, and you can download the latest version of things from here. I'm just in the releases section, and you can download for whatever platform you want. I have the MSI here ready to go for my Windows endpoint, and we're going to walk through the server install on an Ubuntu VM together. Let's bring some music back up. Yeah, there we go. All right. So let's start with our Windows VM. And to do that, we're going to bring up Hyper-V. So the way that I have this set up, I have Hyper-V as my primary hypervisor on this machine, just because it's more performant, really, than what I would use with VirtualBox, even though we did VirtualBox for Hack Summer. So I have my Flare VM, which is for malware analysis anyway, but I have it checkpointed here specifically as pre-ransom. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this thing up, and I have, go ahead and sign in. I have selected from Malware Bazaar a choice offering from Lockbit. So we're actually going to be using some of the more recent ransomware that we were talking about. Now, this machine, I should confirm this, but this machine is on an isolated switch, meaning that no network traffic can get out, right? So that's kind of what you would want to do with your lab VM. You want to make sure that it can't phone home unless you want it to, in which case you want to isolate it in some other way. But for this one, we're going to just block it from hitting the internet. So I've downloaded the sample, but before we infect this thing, let's take a look at the Joe Sandbox report on this particular sample, just so we have an idea of what's going to happen when we run this. So let's see. Here's the Joe Sandbox report for this particular sample. So it looks like it fires off this evil executable, and then we don't know what else happens after that. It looks like connection host runs something, but we don't know what happens after that. So it'll be interesting to see. I really like the Joe Sandbox analyses, but if there is a triage, what we might want to do as well, since I have the triage account, is we might want to run this here anyway. Oh, interesting. Hold, please. Okay, let's go ahead and log in here, and now I can submit a sample to patching triage. So let's go get that file from malware samples, drop that in here, and you got to give it a password. I guess I have to put the password in first. Infected. Let's try that again. And then automatic is fine, but I can also specifically say I want it to run on Windows 10 x64. And we will give it internet access just to see if it does anything cool with that. All right, let's go. All right, so while that's analyzing, hey Syscalls, so what we're doing today is we are looking at Velociraptor, which is a tool for incident response and system monitoring. And in order to do that, what we're doing is we're going to infect a lab system with malware. And that's actually what we're doing here in the cloud first to see what this analysis looks like. And then we're going to do the same thing on our own lab machine right here. In fact, let me move the lockbit zip file over to our lab machine here. And let's extract it with 7-zip. Infected. So the plan is we're going to run this executable, which, you know, don't do this unless you have a lab machine set up like this as well. And then once it's infected, we're going to run Velociraptor. It looks like I have an older version of Velociraptor on here. Yeah, just knock these off. We're going to run Velociraptor on this as well. Is this an agent you run on endpoints and capture samples from there, or do you run after the fact? So EWOCs and PCAPs, both are possible. It depends on how you set it up. So you can have the Velociraptor set up on an endpoint constantly phoning home or constantly acting as a client server on its own system. You can do that. Or you can use it in an incident response context to kind of look at what happened as a post-mortem. And that's what we're going to do first, if it's possible. We'll see how completely wrecked the ransomware makes our machine. That's one of the things I really like about Velociraptor, is that you have so many different options of how to deploy it. The documentation is also really, really, really awesome. And you can see here that there are 3 different modes, right? Standalone, cloud deployment, and triage mode. All right, so let's see how our analysis is going here. Did anything happen? It doesn't look like anything's happened. Let's see what the report looks like. No net. Ooh. Look at these network requests. 88.80, 147. That's neat. You can also, I love this, you can actually download the PCAP from Triage. So good. Now, is this a Microsoft thing? Nope. Okay, so that's evil. Well, probably. That's not a Microsoft IP address. So that looks like that's behavior that came from this particular process. Now, because it's port 80, right, it's HTTP, presumably, we might be able to actually see something in the PCAP, which is cool. So I'm going to download the PCAP for this too, just because, you know, why not? Let's open that up with Wireshark. And remind me later about that update. So we have that destination, right? So we can use that as a filter. Yeah, ip.dest equals, and then we'll put that IP address in there. That's our filter. And look, we have communication. Now what we can do here is, rather than look at each individual packet, we can follow the TCP stream, see if there's anything useful here. It doesn't look like it, though. It's possible that this IP is already down. Or it's possible that Defender actually knocked it down. Although I don't think so for the lab. So looking at individual packets here, we're just seeing some, it looks like, even though it's over 80, it may be encrypted. This is obviously gibberish. And then you see these multiple retransmissions, which is interesting. You're getting multiple fin packets. which may be a programming mistake in the Lockbit ransomware. So let's go ahead and run this thing on our system and see what happens. Fingers crossed. And I do, just in terms of best practice, what I have done is I've created a checkpoint for my system pre-ransomware, right? So that way, once I run this, if I want to go back in time to a clean system, it's very easy to do that. Another thing I love about using Hyper-V for this. All right. And then Steelbit fires off. Look at this! Look at this! So it's trying to check all these servers, and it's not able to find anything. Look at this, though. And hey, look, there's that IP address, 88.80.147.102. It's trying to connect to all these different servers. Why am I able to see this? Why isn't this window hidden? And obviously, it's not going to be able to connect to any of these because, you know, I've blocked this off. Now, I can kill this, apparently. Insane. And what I can do is I actually have some tools on this Flare machine that I can use to simulate. Yep, NetSim or FakeNet NG. Yep, that's right. I think it's iNetSim, right? Microsoft Defender found threats. Yeah, I bet you did. We'll leave it on the device, though, for the moment. That's very funny. Okay. Yeah, FakeNet does the same sort of thing. I think that's what we're going to use here. So, yeah, that's fine. Yeah, see? Now we're getting something. Now, this is probably still going to crash because we can't... Right? It's getting server connections. But it's not actually going to be able to present it with the right data. But that's okay. We still have enough to get going with our... We still have enough to get going with our detection. Right? So let's close the window. And what's nice is the system is still functional, which isn't always true when you fire ransomware off at it. So let's go ahead and install Velociraptor on this thing and see what happens. So I'm just going to take the MSI, install it. Mute the sound on this. I think I ran into this before, that the MSI does not work super well. Yeah, Velociraptor isn't installed yet. So let's go back to our documentation for Velociraptor. And let me just check. Yeah, getting started. We're doing a standalone deployment technically. And let's go get the EXE rather than the MSI. We'll try that. Alrighty. So this is cool. So the Velociraptor here is pretty much a standalone. So what I can do is I can, from velociraptor.exe, I can run kind of as a client. I can set it up to configure it. I can set it up to, phone home to an actual server that's collecting. Or I can run the GUI or run it as a service, right? So it almost works like Sysmon in that way. Just to get started, I'm going to run it with the GUI flag, the GUI option. And look at that. Yeah, I'll open it up with Edge. Why not? And we have Velociraptor running. So now we're able to use Velociraptor to collect information on this particular system. Now, in order to do anything with it, we have to either create a notebook or create a hunt or whatever. You can see we have our system status here. Because again, basically what we're doing is we're running Velociraptor as a server on the same system that we're trying to investigate. And we can create new hunts. We can select artifacts. So let's do just kind of like a demo hunt. We're going to run it everywhere. Or we could have selected specific hosts if we had it in multiple places. We're going to look for, let's see, like a process. Is there Sysmon stuff in here? Oh, cool. So this parses and returns events from Windows EVTX logs. All right, let's configure parameters. Do path ID regex. We'll say the start date is today. The end date is today. Or I guess the end date would be today at like... let's say 11 p.m. Yes, I want to run this hunt. Now, it's probably going to take a little bit to collect all those. And the other thing we could have done is we could have... we stop it. Do we have any data coming in? So it's a collector. It is a collector. But it can also receive we're running it as an investigative tool on a specific endpoint, but we can also run it as a server, which we'll set up in a minute. Yeah. You can select multiple tasks to do at once. You can also, of course, select multiple locations. Oh, hey, this finished. Okay, so what have we found? I don't want the CSV. You can also create a notebook, which is a little bit different. Let's go back to their documentation and talk a little bit about how this works. So go to user interface, investigating clients, Velociraptor artifacts, which is where we are. An artifact is a YAML file which tells Velociraptor how to collect a set of files or information in order to answer a specific question. And that's what we were using before, those artifacts in our hunt. And, you know, we have the defaults, but they are intended to be customized. Can we edit this hunt? No. Let's make a new one. All right, we're going to run it everywhere. We're going to select artifacts. Let's look for process stuff. Evidence of execution. That's cool. Hey, Ted918, how you doing? All right, so we're going to use this Windows evidence of execution. So it combines the findings of several other collectors into an overview of all program execution artifacts. That's cool. Let's try that. Figure the parameters. Okay. Off we go. Now, I'm hoping I'm doing this right. I'm going to go through the documentation again and just make sure. So again, we're kind of doing a standalone deployment. And in fact, I believe that there's a quick start even here on the repo itself. Yeah, right? If you want to see, just start GUI. Exactly, then this is what we're doing. You can collect artifacts from the client as normal. Cool, cool. All right, this thing is still running. That's fine. While this is going then, why don't we get started setting up our actual Velociraptor server? And we would do that in a standalone deployment. I have to get the latest release. So it's so interesting. The binary that they release is everything in one. It is the server, it's the client, it's the GUI, it's everything that you need. Really wild. So because I've set up a server that we're going to use here. It's an Ubuntu 2004 server, just like we were using in Hack Summer. So I have set this up, and I've given it 2 network interfaces. One that I have direct access to for the IP address, and one on the isolation lab so that it can talk to the Flare machine without it getting outside. So I'm going to set up our server to work that in that network. Let's take a look at what I have first with my IP addresses. You can see I've got a Class C IP address here. That's my direct connection. That's how I'm SSH'd into this thing in the first place. But my ETH1 doesn't have an IP address. And if I look at my Flare machine, just kidding. I don't have an IP address here either, so I can make one, of course. And I'm going to just give it sort of like a 10.0.99.0/24 IP address. So let's go through that process. And we'll use the new config here. So the IP address is going to be 10.0.99. Let's say 10. And the prefix length is 24. And we can put in a gateway, but it won't matter because we're not going to give it an actual gateway. Okay. And let's just confirm terminal style that worked. Awesome. So 10.0.99.10, and the gateway is 99.1. Now I'm going to give ETH1 on this Ubuntu server an IP address on the same subnet. To do that, because it's Ubuntu 2004, I'm going to edit the net plan file. And we have to make a change to ETH1. It is not going to be DHCP. It is going to be addresses. Every time I always think that I have it cold, and I never do. Yeah, addresses, and then YAML. So it'll be 10.0.99. Let's call it .5. And let's see if I can get away without doing name servers. It might require them, but we'll see. So once I have this set up, obviously it's DHCP false, and I've set up the IP address. Save that, and then I do sudo netplan apply. I forgot the CIDR. /24. Done. Now, if I look at my IP address show, you can see I have my second network interface is on the same subnet, and everything's looking good. If I try to ping 10.0.99.10, just kidding. Yeah. Let's try see if it goes the other way. That might be a firewall thing from Flare. Yeah. So I can ping 99.5. So we have communication between the two. Is the point. And let's see how our collection is going. Not finished yet. So we'll let that keep rolling. And we still have to set up our server. So to do that, I have internet access on this server. So I am going to grab the Linux installer from here. And so this is Linux AMD 64. I'm going to copy that link address and just wget it. And it's just a standalone executable, unbelievably. All right, so let's go install this thing and follow the documentation to do so. Velociraptor config generate -i. Interesting that it's not root. So that's fine. And for ease, I'm going to rename this to Velociraptor. And, all right, so it's executing. You can see we have many of the same options that we had before. Actually, the exact same options that we had before. So we're going to do config generate and -i for interactive, I presume. Yeah, config generate -i. So what OS will the server be deployed on? This is Linux. Path to the data store directory, that's fine. opt/velociraptor. We will use a self-signed SSL TLS certificate. That's okay. We could, if we were doing this in the cloud, or if we were on the internet, we could do something from Let's Encrypt. Ooh, checking in from Kenya. You're very welcome. Thank you so much for hanging out. I think that's our first confirmed Kenyan viewer, so that's pretty rad. It's John Ogao. What is the public DNS name of the master front end? It doesn't really have one, but we can give it. We'll call it Velociraptor. And we'll listen on port 8000, that's fine. The front end, this is kind of an interesting terminology, because as a web developer, when I think of front end, I think of like the web interface, right? As opposed to the back end, which is the server code. But the way that Velociraptor refers to this is a little bit different. The front end, if we look at the architecture here, the front end is the server itself. And so separate from the GUI, which is kind of wild, right? The front end is the back end in every other context. I don't know why they called it that, but whatever. So the point is that they're asking for where the server is going to listen for the clients to phone home to. So when we install Velociraptor as a client on other systems, it will be, those clients will be phoning home to port 8000 on this system. For our GUI, we're going to do 8889. That's fine. Are we using Google Domains Dynamic DNS? We are absolutely not. GUI username or email address to authorize. We'll just leave it empty for now. Okay. Okay, so we've created the configs. Let's take a look at those configs. And this is cool too. So we have these two config files. What I presume is going on is that we have the server config, which we will then use when we install this thing as the server. And then the client config. So here's the self-signed cert, right? Yeah. That's cool. That's cool. Now, in order for this to work, right, in order for this phone home to actually work, I could have given it the IP address. But I can also just edit the hosts file on the systems that we're going to be using, which is what I'm going to do. So over on Flare, this thing's still running. Over on Flare, we're going to run notepad.exe. Oh, and this isn't running as admin anyway, is it? Let's run another administrator PowerShell. The host file in Windows is in a weird place. It's in C Windows System 32. And then, oh, is it drivers? Yeah, drivers, not config. Drivers, etc. And then if we go to all files, there's hosts. And so what we're going to do here is we're just going to add 10.0.99.5, and we're going to call it Velociraptor. Having done so, we should be able to ping Velociraptor. And that works out just fine. All right, cool. So we have everything we need to actually phone this thing home. Now, the server is not yet up and running. We just have the configs for it, right? Oh, this is cool. So if you need to add users later, let's do that. So let's modify the config with Velociraptor config, server config. And I'll add my username. So we're going to solve that problem a little bit. First thing we're going to do is sudo cp or mv Velociraptor to user local bin. And then we're going to sudo chmod plus s user local bin Velociraptor. Just kidding. We're going to chown it first. And then we're going to chmod plus s. Now, works great. Velociraptor config server config up front end -v, which will run it. Okay. Oh, front end. Now, what's that -v? Is it just verbose? Let's use --help to see if we get help. Yep, okay. So v is verbose, and there's some other options. Okay. -v is fine. Okay, so the GUI is at 8889, and the client is ready to handle, or the front end is ready to handle clients from at port 8000. Now, obviously, if I go to localhost here, it's not going to take me anywhere because localhost on my machine, that's not right. So instead, we're going to go to, I think it's 1 and 2, 168.22. Possibly not. You know, I really should have fired up a tmux session here. Yes, I'm going to do that. All right. Yeah, it was 1.22. Okay. None of these has history. Okay, so sudo Velociraptor. Oh yeah, see how it is running as root now? That's a little bit misleading. Where it has the non-root shell indicator here, but then down here, you plainly have to run it as root. Velociraptor config server config.yaml front end -v. Okay. And I wonder if I have to edit my host file on my machine too in order to make that work. It's entirely possible. web servers can be persnickety about how the request comes in with the host header. So we'll run notepad.exe, C, Windows, System32, I really do not like the autocomplete. Drivers, Etsy, are you kidding me? Etsy, hosts. Yeah, we can not, I actually killed these, so 192.168.1.22, and we'll call that Velociraptor. See if that does any better. It does not. We may have to redo the config. We can also do some stuff like, let's see. Okay, hey, server URLs is a list. Wait, that's the server for the client, right? Not the web install. Aha, this is the part that we need to fix. Right here. The bind address is wrong. It shouldn't be 127.0.0.1. It should be 192.168.1.22. That's sorted. Okay. Let's try that one more time. All right, so we're getting the right IP address here. And a we're in. So we have a Velociraptor server set up. Now, this is not the way that I would want to deploy this necessarily, because we're running it with this verbose server, like it's attached to a terminal. That sucks. We don't want that. So instead, what we want to do is figure out how to deploy this as a service, whether it's like a systemd service or something else like that. And I think Velociraptor has the ability to do so, or we can just set up a systemd service ourselves if we need to. But I believe that if I run Velociraptor help, I believe that it has the ability to set itself up as a service. No? Let's see what Velociraptor front end does for us. Okay, so we would have to set it up as a systemd service, which is a pain, but not impossible. Welcome, friends of the Guar, and maybe also the Guar. I felt so bad. I saw that you started streaming the Guar like as soon as I did. I never like. Yeah, good morning. Or is it afternoon for you? I'm never sure. Cause you're like one time zone away from here, or at least one time zone away from me. Yeah, okay. Yeah, good to see you, and thanks so much for hanging out during the Backdoors and Breaches game last night. That was crazy fun. All right. So we've got Velociraptor rolling here. And this is what it looks like. Yeah, it was solid conversation, and it's recorded, so I'll make sure that the folks who were involved can see that. So what we're doing today, for folks who just showed up, we are taking a look at Velociraptor as a config management service. Well, I shouldn't say it that way. Sort of as a configuration monitor service, an event monitoring service for security events and other system events, and also as an incident response tool. It can do both. So what we've done so far is oh, stupid flare. Okay. My Windows license is expired, so I only get an hour at a time with this thing. So that's fine. What we're gonna do, I actually like this. This is gonna work out great. So what we're gonna do with our flare machine is we had infected it with ransomware, and then we ran flare on it. What we're gonna do is we're gonna go back in time. We're going to apply this checkpoint. And run it from there. And then we're going to install Velociraptor using the config that we just generated. Thinking through that, I realize that we are going to have to modify the server config one more time. Why? Because oh, actually, no, we won't. Just kidding. No, I will, because the API is bound to 127.0.0.1. That's no bueno. That's not going to work. Instead, I need to set that up to the network, the Isolation Lab network, 10.0.99.5. There we go. Otherwise, the API server wouldn't actually work. Hope that's right. Sorry, let me kill that again. I want to just... I'm going to look for 127. Anyone here? Yeah, see? All right, we're going to just %s 127 0 0 1 with 10.0.99.5. That way, for sure, it's listening on the right network. Oh, it was anyway, though. That's cool, because the bind address for Velociraptor was on port 8000. But it was bound to 0000, so that was every interface that it had. Nevertheless, actually, let me not do that then. We'll try it without that change and see if it works okay. Okay, so Flare is up and running, and we are going to install Velociraptor as a client on this. So I have an older version of Velociraptor on here, but I'm going to give it a new version. Oop, I did not want to open Spotify. Hey chat, has anybody played with Windows 11? Just curious. I haven't had a chance to get my paws on it, and I don't know what it's all about. All I know about it is that it looks very much like, to me, it looks like plasma. KDE plasma. Look. The light breeze theme. So this is KDE, right? And then this is Windows 11. That seems very similar. I mean, it's a little like Mac OS, I suppose. It really, to me, feels like Plasma. We should do a Linux desktop session at some point. Maybe we'll do that on Wednesdays. Yeah, more flattened graphics. Lost my train of thought. Okay, yeah. Okay, so we're installing Velociraptor over here. Let's open up an administrative PowerShell. Yes. And deploying clients, we have documentation exactly for this. Now we have to get that client config. Client-v. Oh, that's how we would do it on a Linux system. The official Velociraptor MSI package installs a Windows service with a predictable name. That's what I want to do. Okay, so we're going to get the config.yaml from our server. Oh, there's a cool way to do this too. Okay, so I have the config, the client config.yaml on my server, right? Let's resize these windows here. And let's vim client config.yaml. And let's just make sure, yeah, Velociraptor, everything looks good. Looks good, looks good, looks good. Okay, so I need this to get over onto the system I'm trying to install the client on, right? To do that, I have a couple of different options, but I'm going to do it the red teamy way, which is I'm going to use Python to fire up an HTTP server on here on 8888, and then over on my Flare machine, I am going to use invoke web request URI http://10.0.99.5 port 8888 and client.config.yaml out file client.config.yaml. What? Oh, forget it. Let me just visit it through Edge. Oh, oh, I'm being very, very dumb. I reset the machine, right? So first of all, I need to redo Velociraptor, or I need to redo the hosts file. Mm-hmm. And I need to reset the IP address. All right, let's try that one more time. Much better. Yep, there's client.config.yaml. So what I can do now is run velociraptor.exe config client.config.yaml service install. Okay. Config client config.yaml service install. And Velociraptor is running. Now let's see in our web UI if we have a client. Oh no! Oh, I might have broken this when I messed with the config, but that's fixable. Yeah. That was dumb. 127.0.0.1. Was that the only one I broke? Let's hope so. And currently connected clients is 1. That probably shouldn't look like that, but whatever. Yep, here's our one client. That's really, really cool. All right, so we have this thing phoning home. Now we can actually perform hunts on it, right? So let's make a new hunt here. And we'll actually look for services. List all the installed services. Let's see if that actually works. All parameters are good here, I think. Yeah. And go. We're connected to our Windows system here. This one shouldn't take too long, right? Let's say paused. No, I want it to be running, please. State finished. Total bytes, total rows. Okay, cool. So generic client info looks like this, and then Windows System Services. There we go. So we finally got our results. So we can see all the services from here. Now, let's run some evil on it, right? Now that we have... Let's actually make a new checkpoint as well. And I like to name my checkpoints pretty explicitly so that I know what the story is with each one of them. All right. Any requests, chat, for the kind of information we want to try to get back from this thing? While we're at it, I'm going to try to set up a... This might not work. I'm going to make a new VM, if I can. And we'll make it a Linux desktop. Do I have a desktop ISO? I should. Ah, yes, I do. Great. So I'm going to make a new virtual machine. Gen 2, thank you very much. Startup. We'll give it 4 gigs of RAM. That should be more than sufficient. And we're going to connect it to the isolation lab. By the way, I'm working on how to automate this a little bit more. Using Vagrant and a few other tools to script out these kinds of things. I just haven't gotten there yet. So, you know, I know that it's a little bit clunky to be point and clicking my way through these VM creations. It's not very DevOpsy, but, you know, it's not super slow. And it's not like we're running a fleet of hundreds of these things. All right, there's the desktop ISO. And we will finish that. The problem, of course, there is think the issue is the name. I think I might have had an older... Yeah, there we go. And also, you have to disable secure boot. I wonder if that to work. We'll fire this up. And this one I really should have done with Vagrant too, because then I would have just had the machine up and running. But that's okay. This is a good follow-on from Hack Summer, because we never really got into using Ubuntu Desktop or any Linux desktop. Okay. Now, something that Velociraptor has that we haven't talked about a whole lot is this thing called VQL, the Velociraptor query language. And it allows it, think of it like OS query. It allows us to create a specific query from the kinds of data that we can pull back from Velociraptor. And that's really, like, if we look at one of these things, it is, what we're running is VQL queries. That's what we're doing. And so you can create your own. This is cool. You can look for is possible past PowerShell. So this is neat. This will decode PowerShell encoded commands. So if there is a PowerShell encoded command in here, it'll find it. That's pretty cool. So if we wanted to run that hunt, we could do this, call it PowerShell, go to command, commands. And here we could run, let's say, match by label, or we could do operating system included Windows, right? Obviously, we only care about PowerShell on Windows. I mean, you can run PowerShell on Linux, but probably not. And select artifacts. Let's look for PowerShell. Encoded? Is that what I want? Did I not just see? server.powershell.encoded command. Okay. So if I make a hunt, operating system, Windows. Oh, fascinating. Okay, so perhaps I should not specify by my operating system. Does that give me more options here? No, it does not. That's interesting. I wonder why. Let's learn more about artifacts. Since clearly I'm missing something. Server artifacts. Oh, I see. Server-side VQLs are encapsulated in server artifacts. Oh. So we want to get PowerShell commands first, and then... Okay, that's interesting. So it's not really a hunt, it's over here, right? We're going to make a new collection. Still not there, huh? Yeah, I'm not really sure what I'm missing here, but it's not, you know... I see. The client must be running the Windows events process creation event artifact to retrieve process execution logs. So interestingly, Angel, it's a good question. What I can do from here is I can review it and edit it. Okay, so what I actually want to do is run this first. That's neat. Okay, so I will do that. I will run... We'll stop this test hunt because it's not as helpful, but we will make process creation. Yeah, that's fine. And do I not? I have no Windows.events? This is cool, though. The virtual file system is handy. If I want to go through... the VFS. So... let's look at the client config to see if I'm missing something here. So the client config doesn't determine what artifacts are running. Let's actually read this. So imagine you receive an alert about potential suspicious activity. Interactively examine the endpoint, allows you to do just that. Simply search for the client in the GUI and navigate its file system remotely. You can download remote files, read registry keys, and look at evidence stored in volume shadow copies. Yeah? So if I have this machine here, if I click on VFS, I guess I'm refreshing the file system. By the way, we're still installing Ubuntu over here. We'll do minimal installation. Off you go. We are over here. All right, let that do its thing. This is still refreshing. Ah, good. There, so I can go to the C drive. It's refreshing now, so it's loading all the data from this system. That's cool, though, that you can browse the file system remotely. And then, so artifacts are supposed to be defined and tweaked by the user. They are defined using YAML in a simple human readable file. So this is a sys.users. The name of the artifact is a dot separated string used to identify the artifact. So this is the query. Let's look at the artifacts in here. Okay, there we go. So if we edit it, we see the actual YAML of the artifact as it's defined here. Yeah, I don't want to collect everything, though, Angel, for performance reasons. We can see the main section. The name of the artifact is a dot separated string. Okay, precondition is a VQL query must be satisfied before the source is collected. Select OS from info where OS equals Windows. Interesting. Okay. So this means it only works on Windows clients. Then we run this query to get the data. Then the report is query user, select name, UID. So this is what creates the table. I'm not sure what you mean, Angel, by the usage. I think that in a real life deployment, you would set up the kinds of artifacts that you definitely want to be collecting and pretty specifically target those, right? Whether it's stuff that you would be, this is great for threat hunting, for example, right? Because you are, if I want to look for PowerShell encoded commands, if I want to look for, processes like with specific parents that are weird, right? Like if I shouldn't ever see w3wp.exe fire off like a command shell or something like that. I can use Velociraptor to create those hunts. Oh, yes, Angel, now I understand what you're saying. Yes, it's very much like EDR triage packages. Absolutely. That's right. In a way, though, it's more dynamic because with those triage packages, they go and collect history, right? And then you download it. Whereas with Velociraptor, I mean, that works, but you can also have a more ongoing process as well. Okay, so we have these artifact concepts. That's fine. The artifact contains a report that helps the user make sense of the collected evidence and provides simple post-processing capabilities. Reports are templates that are evaluated on the artifact's results and produce simple markdown, graphs, tables, and other primitives. Cool. Now we're going to hunt for artifacts across. Once we search the selected endpoint of interest, we can switch to the collected artifacts view. The page shows the artifacts collected previously on the endpoint. Clicking the plus button clicks more artifacts. Okay, so let's go over to our client here. These are our collected artifacts, right? And if we go collect new, okay, here we go. Process info. Okay. We're not going to do anything fancy with the process name regex. We're going to specify our resources. That's fine. And we're going to fire that off. And you can see this list directory is what I'm doing for the VFS, right? To be able to navigate the VFS. And it's still running, of course. And listing C is going to be wild, right? It's going to take a while. I might... Actually, can I stop this? Maybe not. So hunts are different than... Hunts are different than getting a specific artifact from a specific client. Okay. And then client artifacts versus client event artifacts. Velociraptor's VQL language is unique in that it allows queries to run in the background and take a long time without using CPU resources. This means that VQL is an asynchronous streaming query engine. Updating client event monitoring. Ah, this is where we are able to set it up. So I think this is really neat. So in order, remember we want that PowerShell encoded command thing, right? In order to do that, we had to have a prerequisite. If we look at all of our artifacts again, sorry, that's here. Right, it said that the client must be running the Windows Events Process Creation event artifact. And I believe... Why can't I click on that? Oh, because the... Dang it. What I really need to do is reset up the Flare VM with a new trial so that I don't have to worry about this thing shutting off. But this should be coming back online in a second. Yep, IP address is still set. And so if we reload this, we should see something come back. We can close this. There we go. Ah, good. And now we have this back. So we can edit the client monitoring table. Select artifacts. What is it? Process creation, right? That's our... There it is. So we have to add this to our event collection. Very good. Okay, so we're going to do this. Okay. And you can see that it's now been added to our artifacts that we're collecting. We fire that off. That's great. And look, our C drive is visible here. Now I would have to sync the users folder, but you can see that I'm getting data back from this, which is pretty cool. And I could also get the registry from this as well, which would be very, very handy. You know, imagine the ability to look at an endpoints registry without having to get onto the system. That's crazy handy, and honestly something that I don't see from even a whole lot of EDR tools. Okay. So hunts are a little bit different than setting up client artifacts. This is really about, right, configuring. Okay, let's look at print process creation. No data available. Client stats. We do have client stats though. That's neat. And so we did forensics process info, and we're listing directories. So we do have the process data, so that's working out. Okay, so for each one of these, we have the... Oh, and now it's back. And there's the report. Oh, that's so cool. Okay, so it just took some time. And now it's coming back. And eventually there will be more. So it really does update in real time. So a notebook, I believe, is to process data from what you have coming in. Oh, right. Literally right here is showing like decoded PowerShell. All right, so these are server event artifacts. And if we look for encoded commands, there it is. Okay, so here, yep. So we don't have any encoded commands to read here, but they would be available. Did I lose Flare again? No. So it only shows 3 services running. That's not a lot. There's 105 rows here. Oh, there we go. That's better. So it's taking time, but it's coming in. And our Linux machine is almost ready. And let's see. We wanna run some evil on this thing to see how we can see it happen. Now, the malware that we used, the Lockbit ransomware, was maybe not the best choice just because it had to phone home to a C2 server first. Let's see if we can find something in Malware Bazaar that is PowerShell specific. Okay, cool. We do have a bunch of stuff here. So this is the Remcoast rat. That's interesting. Oh, and this is just Print Nightmare. Some Cobalt Strike. Epsilon Red. Yeah, let's try this PowerShell ransomware. We'll see how this does. Yeah, that's good. I always lose 7-zip in here. There it is. Extract here. Okay. Damn it. Stream died again at 2 hours. On the dot. I think what we're going to have to do is, I don't think the issue is with my ISP anymore, with the stream issues. I think the issue is with Streamlabs. I really do. Something's going on where at 2 hours, it just dies. And I don't know why. But we might have to test out if it's the multi-stream service. And I might have to take the YouTube stream down. That might be what's killing it. We'll try that next time. Let's run. Can't find red.exe, huh? Interesting. Now, let's see if we got any process info from Velociraptor on that. Even though it was an unsuccessful run. Can I sort by these things? 1843. So let's go to the final row here. Look at this. Yes, we are. Wow, look at this. So where does this start getting evil? So here's PowerShell. And then as soon as PowerShell kicks off, we start seeing conhost issues. Now, the parent PID is interesting. Let's see if we got any more. Sure do. Yeah, this is good info. Now, can I add? I want to add. Do I have a Sysmon artifact that I can get? Yes, I do. That's so cool. This means that I can get Sysmon logs directly into Velociraptor. That's really neat. Okay. Is there anything to configure here? Nothing to configure. Okay. And we'll fire that off. Might take a minute for that to show up. Let's get back to our Linux machine here. Still installing, okay. Oh, so cool. They have a listing for every single artifact that comes preloaded in Velociraptor right here. And of course the VQL reference. The VQL seems very powerful, and of course I don't know it enough to make use of it to do like a custom query, but very, very powerful. And again, this is all free and open source. Now, Velociraptor was just purchased, or acquired, I should say, by Rapid7. But I don't believe their intention is to do anything to modify the open source nature of Velociraptor. They may incorporate Velociraptor into some of their products, which would be really great, to be honest with you. Okay, so Velociraptor is licensed as AGPL3. Yeah. There we go. There's our Sysmon log forwarding. It's probably going to take a minute to actually get data in here, but we have process coming in, and we have 74 of these now. Yep, Sysmon's running. Great. Oh, look at that. Stop. It actually installs Sysmon itself. So not only, that's wild, not only does it collect Sysmon logs, but it has its own configuration for Sysmon, which I suppose makes sense. Although, I wouldn't mind being able to configure that myself, right? For the IDs that I want to collect. But damn, look at that. Sysmon logs directly into Velociraptor. That's so great. Let's fire off that ransomware again. I want to see what Sysmon sees with this. The client stats is really helpful too from a performance metric standpoint, because it tells you how much the client is using. So round about 5%. looks like, of CPU for heavy load. Popping up to about 8 for heavy hunts. So you get a report too. That's neat. That's handy. That's like, this is nicer performance metrics than I'm used to getting from, you know, EDR. There we go. Look at that. We're getting event ID 1. There's PowerShell. Oh, look at that. It's trying to build. Now, let's talk about notebooks, because it doesn't seem like notebooks are listed in the documentation, but they seem important. So let's make a notebook and see what it is. All right, what can we do with the test notebook? Edit notebook. No. There we go. Okay. So I can add VQL. Add self from flow. So I can, okay, so this is whether it's Markdown or VQL. I see. So it's like a Python notebook, kind of. So if I add self from this cell, that doesn't make any sense. Let's trash this. Add self from hunt. Okay, I don't want to add a self from hunt. Add self from flow is interesting. So from flow, I have like list directory, system services, client info. I don't have the sysmon stuff, which is interesting. But I could get it potentially. So if I look at my sysmon log forward, these are server events. Oh, hey, it is picking up encoded commands, by the way. That's pretty cool. Yeah, so this doesn't give me in my, I can't get at it at my notebook, it looks like. I'm wondering, though there were so this is all artifacts, right? So sysmon log forward, and then parses returns events from Windows EVTX logs. And do I have... I don't have that going on this one. But if I created a specific hunt, right, I could do that. So I'm going to do an event hunt. And I will select my artifacts if I do EVTX. Because I don't think sysmon is... Yeah, I don't really want that. I want EVTX. Now, I want to configure the parameters. And I want my event ID, path regex. Is this XPath, you think? Let's actually look at the documentation. Windows event logs. No. What am I looking at here? Windows event logs.evtx. Oh, cool. So EVTX Hunter. This will hunt the event log message field for regex value, but I don't actually want that. So parses returns in... Okay. Regex to match against paths from EDX glob. All right, well, we'll start basic with this one and then see where it goes. Okay, we're not going to do EVTX Hunter. We're just going to do EVTX. Configure parameters. ID regex is going to be 1. Just event ID 1. Off it goes. And the sysmon logs continue to come in. That's so cool. This thing's still on. The lab Ubuntu machine is up, but of course we're almost out of time here, so that's all right. So part of what I'm doing here is I'm trying to come up with a bunch of tools that I want in a permanent lab. And Velociraptor seems like kind of an obvious one. And another one would be, I think, between Velociraptor and Waza, these are the two agents that I would want to have on an endpoint as I'm deploying it. And the thinking is like, what if I wanted to build an effective security program with basically zero software licensing budget? How would I do it? I want to use as many free and open source tools as possible. So I would want to, build out the ELK stack for my SIM for monitoring. I want endpoint data coming in from Waza. And then to monitor or do threat hunting, I want to be able to use Velociraptor so I can go deeper, right? Waza is going to do both detection and potentially response because it has that ability. But it doesn't have that active hunt capability, whereas Velociraptor does. So use Waza for, your EDR, and then this kind of for the next level of it. How's that hunt doing? Okay, it looks like it finished. Oh no. This is the one right here. Did I lose Flare? No, it's still there. It just hasn't phoned home. It's interesting. It seems as though sometimes I lose the ability to look at my fleet here. Yeah, let's delete the test hunt because that's not helpful. What's going on here? Let's get our Linux machine up and running at least. No. 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 Okay. So we're gonna... re-download the Linux release binary onto our server, because remember, that thing is isolated. Or our lab machine is isolated, so... Oh, 601. Whatever. No, I didn't want to open a VirtualBox. Okay, let's wget that. 3 and HTTP server. And actually, okay. And over on Ubuntu, we need to configure the network. Here's how we do that. We'll do it the GUI way. Manual. So it is 10.0.99.0.99. Let's call it 11. The net mask is 255.255.255.0, and the gateway, which doesn't actually matter, is 10.0.99.1. And now say ping C4 10.0.99.5. Okay, great. 10.0.99.5 8888 Velociraptor. Good. And we're going to need also client.config.yaml. Now, Velociraptor config client config.yaml service install. Is that right? Let's go back to the documentation. Make sure I'm not doing anything dumb. Deploy clients. Config. -b, but I don't. Yeah, service install. Weird. Is there a Linux section here? Yeah, okay. Although I'm going to run it as sudo. Let's run it in the background then. And I am not seeing another connected client, which is unfortunate. Oh, of course I'm not. Why not? Because I neglected excuse me, Vim not found. Ubuntu, what are you doing? Ah. There it is. And there is our connection. This hunt still hasn't done anything for us, which is unfortunate. We're gonna stop this hunt because it's... Oh wait, it's paused? Oh my god. Of course it was. No wonder I wasn't collecting anything. And this will be the last thing. I just want to see the... That was fast. Okay, so let's see. So once we run a hunt, it creates a notebook for us. Yeah. No, that's the test notebook. So, but it creates a notebook for us for the hunt. And then the notebook has the data here. And handily if I wanted to, I could clean up this report if I wanted. That's so cool. Okay, that's really, really powerful. Being able to get all of this data. And then, you know, if I wanted to download it into a CSV, I could. I could even, if I really wanted to go crazy, put it into a Jupyter Notebook, something like that. That is very, very powerful. All right, I'm excited. I'm really optimistic about what we can do with Velociraptor. So more to come on Velociraptor, but I think we're going to call it a day. So thank you, everybody, for hanging out. Let's see if I think I saw GoPro streaming. So let's see if we can get, yeah. Let's head over to GoPro's channel. Thanks, everybody, for hanging out. I will be back on Tuesday doing some red team stuff. Until then, be good to yourselves, be good to each other, and happy hacking.